it be like to be an education specialist and global content lead at UNICEF? Now, you might be wondering, what the heck is that all about? Well, that's part of the reason for this episode. We're going to deep dive into this profession as far as roles, responsibilities, rewards, challenges, all that great stuff. But secondly, I think it's another interesting avenue to explore within this world of education and careers. Most people consider teaching within a classroom to be the only option. But certainly there are way more possibilities out there, and this episode represents one such possibility. So I'm really keen to get into it all with you and let you meet our guest today, Dr. Dawn Lee DiPeri. So why don't we get into things? Now, off the top, I did promise to fill in the blanks in terms of what it means to be a global content lead at UNICEF. So here's a clip of Dr. DiPeri explaining just that.
My role is currently a combination of technology and pedagogy, right? So it's I work on an ed tech product. I help to produce learning, so digital learning or e-learning. I've done e-learning development, but I've also worked as a strategist or an instructional designer as well. So I kind of do a mixture of in the weeds type of stuff where I go really deep on certain projects, and then a lot of more general types of things of maybe reviewing strategy documents or working with government counterparts on their overall plan for digital learning in this situation, like a humanitarian crisis. So it's very dynamic.
Now, to provide further clarity in terms of the work that Dr. DiPeri is involved in, she also works on this project called the Digital Learning Passport, which goes out to over 40 countries and also reaches around 6.8 million people. So here's a clip of her explaining that work.
We have 40 different countries that we support currently. So my day in the life can be very varied because I could, in a single day, I could be talking to, say, 3 different countries, from all around the world. So, and their unique humanitarian contexts are very different from each other. So as a learning designer, we really have to do a lot of needs analysis and dive into what does that context look like, and I guess provide support based on those factors, which can be challenging when we're in New York, because I'm based out of New York. So I don't get to travel as much as I would like, but I do my best to do research and travel when I can to just get a clearer picture of what that context is so I can support them. And some of the ways that I support them is by for example, they may have a reason for having a learning passport, and that might be continuity of instruction is often the case. So if there's a climate disaster and children can't go to school, or if their war or trauma has occurred and there's a refugee situation and they're trying to continue the learning from their country that they were leaving. There could be, in some cases, it's directed towards teachers, like teacher professional development or humanitarian workers, or it has it's a really flexible of a program. I'm generally in the K through 12 space, teacher professional development, and a little bit of older adolescents. It really is varied, which is very different from my past life in academia, which was just all, faculty and the typical college age students. So it's very interesting.
Okay, well, next up is a clip of Dr. DiPeri explaining her pathway into the work that she's doing right now. And the interesting thing here is a lot of times people start with this interest in education. And as I said earlier, it usually leads to becoming a teacher within a classroom. But again, there's so many different possibilities there. And this clip kind of speaks to that point. It shows some of her varied interests and how she sort of triangulated and put them all together and found this pathway forward that, of course, now she's finding very, very fulfilling and quite rewarding. So check it out.
I was just always interested in teaching. I love public speaking. I love, talking to other kids, adults, students, and anyway, so I started teaching and I taught in a couple of things because I had the communications, advertising, and graphic design background. I taught at a
Mm,
school that for graphic design, animation, interpersonal communications, couple business type classes. And then one of the most interesting roles was when I was teaching future teachers educational technology, because if you work
mm,
as a graphic designer, you work with a lot of software, and I taught a lot of software, and future teachers need to be like tech savvy now more than ever.
right.
So that got me interested in like just like improving my like practice of instruction. Like future teachers are so inspiring, and they know so well like how to teach.
Yeah.
And then when I was teaching online, that's when I became interested even more in instructional design, because it was like I had the UX background. So I'd be on the learning management system and being like, I don't really like the way this is designed. The navigation's not really great. I feel like I want to be able to inspire and have more like
Mhm.
peer-to-peer or instructor-to-peer conversations. And I'd find ways to build that within the constraints that I have, but was so interested in learning like how to improve it. Because back then when I first started, like online education didn't have a very good reputation, I feel like. And then
Yeah.
obviously when COVID happened, things really like picked up. But I got my doctorate in higher education, teaching and learning, which was kind of a lot. A big part of that is instructional design, a lot of the coursework that I did. So learning design, organizational development,
Mhm.
management, but in that space, like teaching and learning. So my
Yeah.
specialty was in higher ed teaching and learning, and learned all about like learning science. And I was in academia as a professor, and I transferred over to faculty development. So I started like, adult learning. I worked at Harvard as like a faculty developer. And I really liked that role. I did a lot of accessibility and inclusion things.
Mhm.
And then I left Harvard for the UN, partly because they wanted people to be on site, and I was in New York, and so we didn't want to move at the time. And so I found a role that I could be remote. And I found the United Nations, UNICEF. I just got lucky, really. I didn't know anybody who worked there.
Mhm.
So I was really felt like the whole time I feel blessed that I'm working here. So it was like a whole
Yeah.
changing of culture and changing out of industries and
Mm.
learning a whole new language. So
I bet.
that's where I am now for the last like 2.5 years.
One thing I really enjoyed in this conversation were these gems of career wisdom that were revealing themselves throughout. And this next clip kind of speaks to that point. And we're talking about this notion of perceived setbacks in our careers. At times we all have these visions of where we'd like to see things going, and sometimes they just don't unfold the way that we'd hope for. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing, as you'll soon find out from what Dr. DiPeri shares here. So check it out.
I remember being really devastated over not getting a tenure track position as a professor, and I thought that that's what I wanted. And
Yeah.
then like looking back a couple years later working at Harvard and being like, I'm so fulfilled right now, and like I don't think I would have been happy at the school that I lost that role
Mm.
to. And after all of those interviews and all of that intense, I was like, I felt so bad about myself, now looking back, I'm like, I think I was meant to do the path that I am in now. So I guess that's like part of a words of wisdom I give younger folks
Yeah.
is like sometimes one door, like if it closes, another one opens, and it's for the best. And if I hadn't gotten into Harvard, I might not have been looked at the United Nations. Who knows?
Right.
So
Now, shifting back towards the work that Dr. DiPieri is doing, I want to know about some of the less obvious skills that are absolutely critical to doing a great job. These are things that you might not necessarily think of off the top, but again, are very, very important. So here's a clip of that. In terms of your work, what would you say are some of the more, lesser known elements relating to your role and responsibility, but in your mind are absolutely critical to the overall success that you might be having or hoping to have?
I would say communication skills are so important, specifically written. So when you work with people with native languages that are different than your own, and maybe this too because you're in Japan, right? And you probably see
Yeah.
that you have to be really careful with your language, like you're trying to avoid things like idioms or just being really straightforward, succinct. And just the nuances of cross-cultural communication. Maybe if that's obvious when you think you're working for the United Nations but it's just like I didn't realize how important it is specifically to write succinctly and in a way that is like clear. It's so important.
All right, I've got one more clip that I want to share with you today, and this one speaks to this point of fulfillment within the work. Now, as a global content lead at UNICEF, as an education specialist, and being part of this team that is delivering this digital learning platform, My Passport, that reaches 6.8 million people, is in 40 different countries. This is massive impact. This is massive scale. So of course, there's going to be a certain level of reward and fulfillment in being part of this. And this clip picks up with Dr. DiPeri explaining an encounter with some refugee students that were actually utilizing some of these resources. So have a listen.
Saw teachers interacting with them and like making them smile and laugh. And it's so rewarding. So that's what I mean by impactful. A lot of the projects I worked on, like, for example, Syria with the earthquake, like we worked on like a project for earthquake survivors. So it's not just always war and trauma. It could be, poverty or situations where low literacy levels or low digital literacy levels of teachers who've never used digital technology at all, and helping to like bring some digital learning into a physical classroom in a very under-resourced setting is very impactful, I feel like, as well, because you're really transforming the lives of the teachers and also the students. So yeah, that's my favorite part, I think, of working where I am.
Absolutely. I think the word that was kind of like flashing in my mind as I was listening is impact, impact, impact. Yeah, like you said, it spread across so many different levels and layers there, like you said, from the teachers to the children. And it's changing people's lives and trajectories in so many different ways. And that notion of scale, the fact that it's reaching so many people. And oftentimes, in some very challenging moments, as you said, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's, from some sort of conflict in the region. Yeah, you're providing a resource there that's allowing people to reclaim their lives or get things back on track. And how could that not be rewarding when you're a part of a team that has this mission and not only having the mission, but succeeding?
All right, well, I think it's about time to draw this video to a close. But as always, I do encourage you to check out the full-length audio version. There's so much more contained within it. For example, I've got this really great story that Dr. DiPeri shares. We also get into the role of AI and how that's shifting and changing things around. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, there are tons of these career gems of wisdom sprinkled throughout. So you're not gonna wanna miss it. And you can find this audio version wherever you access your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... And while I do have your attention here, I would absolutely love that like or subscribe. Anyway, I will have another video coming for you right next week, so don't miss it. We'll see you then.